Turning some turmeric like this into powder today, so stick around if you want to watch how it's done. G'day folks, it's Rob here. I harvested a whole heap of turmeric just like this little fella here from the Aquaponics a while back, and I've decided to turn it into powder just to give away to family and friends, and I thought I'd bring you along and just show you the process I'm using today. Now there are different types of turmeric, all with their unique medicinal qualities. I'm pretty much not going to touch on that today in this clip. What I've done is I've listed some links in the description below and you can check them out if you're interested in delving into the therapeutic use of turmeric a little bit deeper. Just quickly though, the type we are using here is called ʻækwəઃpʒnᵻks. This is a variety we've been growing for about the last 6 or so years here in our little setup. As I said, this is from the Aquaponics, but we also have a number of little patches growing in wicking beds and wicking barrels around the place as well. When it comes to processing the raw turmeric, I found 2 schools of thought online. The first one suggested boiling it first, as it helps the drying process, helps it dry out faster. It is said to relieve or remove some of the earthy undertones of the flavour of the turmeric, and is also recommended if you want to activate the therapeutic constituents within the turmeric itself. I'm no scientist, like I said, there's links below if you want to look into that. The other school of thought recommended that you just cut the turmeric up raw, laying it out on the tray and drying it that way. I decided to dry some out after it was boiled, as well as just some raw sections as well, just to see which we prefer to use in our cooking. The first 600 grams or 1.3 pounds of turmeric root was dropped into a pot, had a couple of teaspoons of bicarb or baking soda added into it, and then covered with water and brought to the boil. From what I've read on a few different sites and been told by Dave, thank you very much Dave, the bicarb is added to help preserve the colour in the root, so you get a nicer, more vibrant finished product. I let the pot boil for a few minutes and then reduced it to a slow boil for roughly around about 30 minutes all up. I think I also topped up the water probably twice during that half-hour period. Once the roots were soft enough for a skewer to pass through them easily, I put them aside in a colander, just let them drip dry, and then pop them aside for the next day when they'd go into the dehydrator. When it came time to slice up the root, I left the skin on as I saw no real reason to remove it. It's all edible. The majority of the root was cut lengthwise, as the mesh on the racks in our dehydrator is fairly large, and once the slices shrink, I thought they may have tended to fall through the gaps. I also tried to slice the roots no thicker than 5 mil or 3/16 of an inch, so they would all dry out at a fairly consistent rate. The pieces were then arranged onto trays of the dehydrator and slotted in. The dehydrator was set on roughly 40 degrees centigrade and let run for roughly 12 hours. Now ours is a pretty cheap unit and I can't be sure how hot it actually does run, so it might pay for you to double check with your manufacturer what times and temperatures you're going to need if you're going to have a crack at making your own powder up. After a while it became obvious that some of the root was shrinking far too much and started to fall through the gaps in the mesh, so I slid a tin tray on the vacant bottom rack just to catch any that fell through. So once I was happy that the chips were dry enough, the next step of the process was to grind them up. Now I popped ours into our Thermomix kitchen machine and it did a great job at grinding up the root sections. I have used a small bullet blender when making up tomato and chili powders before, and I think that'd do just as good a job. You just need to keep the quantities down a little bit lower to get a nice fine powder. We processed the dried root in the Thermi for pretty much about 30 seconds, 35 seconds, and then ran it through a fine mesh sieve, 1 spoonful at a time, just to remove any of the larger chunks, which I think was pretty much all just leftover bits of skin. The rest of the powder turned out pretty fine. There were a few little gritty bits in there, but nothing too much to worry about. They'll soften up during the cooking process. In the second batch, I popped 1.5 racks of peeled raw root, so there was no skin on this lot, and 1.5 racks of boiled root again, just so I could compare the difference mainly. Some of the boiled root was also peeled, and it ended up turning a lot darker around its exposed edges when compared with the roots that were boiled with the skin left on. They were added to the dehydrator for the same amount of time and at the same temperature as the previous batch. As I expected, the peeled raw root came out of the dehydrator with more of the traditional yellow colouring than the root that was boiled with the bicarb of soda. So once the roots were done, I separated them into the raw and the boiled, and they were processed separately in the thermo. So the ones that were boiled pretty much all went along the same lines as the first batch. I needed to sieve out the large chunks. The raw turmeric, on the other hand, virtually no large chunks whatsoever. There was a few large bits of grit, but that was about it. And I'm putting that down to the fact that there was no skin on this turmeric at all, so it just made a better, finer product in the end. We all did a bit of a sniff test of the powders after they were finished being processed, and we all agreed that the raw powder came out smelling like a fresh bit of root wood from the ground once it's harvested. The boiled one though did come out smelling a little bit milder, which I can pretty much will put down to a lot of the volatile oils being removed during the boiling process. I did a bit of a taste test with the two powders, just dabbed it on the tongue, and the raw one came out a lot stronger in flavour. I didn't detect any of the earthy tones though that people talk about, but then again we could just be used to the fact that we cook with a lot of the fresh turmeric, so we don't really notice it now. Weight wise, I processed 1.2 kilos or 2.6 pounds worth of root between the two batches, and that gave us a yield of around about 290 grams or 0.6 of a pound. So a pretty good conversion there, I thought. As for storage of the powder, it should last around about 2 to 3 years, I've read, is a conservative figure. Other people have said 5 years it'll last that long. I suppose once the flavour deteriorates, yeah, you pretty much will want to replace it with a new batch, hoping ours doesn't last that long and we finish it off well before then. So I'm pretty happy with the way the powdering process went overall, and I think I'll be doing it a lot more with future harvests. At the moment, we're pretty much all pureeing the fresh root and then freezing it in little blocks. It takes up space in the freezer, so if we can dry it and put it in, containers, it, should take up a lot less space in the pantry. Now, if you are interested though in seeing how we do preserve our fresh turmeric, you can click on that little link up there and it'll take you to a clip just showing you how we make up the paste for freezing. If you found this clip to be useful in any way, feel free to share it around online. You might help somebody else out. If this is the first time you've been to our channel, you can hit that little subscribe button up there and you'll be sent a notification whenever we post a clip on our backyard farm or aquaponics. Actually, we've got the ginger just over my shoulder there and another little stand in a wicking barrel down towards the hoop house that needs to be harvested soon. So if you subscribe, you'll get a notification and see those clips pop up. Also going to do one on how we process it for long-term storage as well. Also wanted to let you folks know that our Patreon channel is now live, so you can check out the little link down there and go and suss it out if you feel like it. I do hope everyone's gardens are booming and everyone is well and happy, and I will catch you next clip. Cheers, folks. So here's a look at the aquaponic ginger for you folks who haven't seen it before. Hopefully you'll see a clip in a week or so's time. Cheers all.